Hello, so today we're going to be talking about the early American colonies and what life was like back then. So, first of all, let's talk about what the early colonies in America were. And this or what time period we're referring to. And we're kind of looking at in between the Pilgrims and the Revolutionary War. So, everything I'm talking about is happening in between the 1620s and the 1770s. So that's kind of the scope of time we're looking at. Okay, so what was life like in the early American colonies? Well, we're going to be looking at three major groups of life. We're going to be looking at the lives of women, we're going to be looking at life at sea, and we're going to be looking at life in the Caribbean. And so those are going to be our three lifestyles we're going to look at. So first of all, let's look at the lives of women. So we're going to look at Martha Ballard's diary, as it's kind of a good example of what things were like. So she lived on a small farmhouse with her husband, and they had a windmill, which was how they would make their money. Now, the issue comes when the windmill burns, and they essentially lose their source of money, and they only could get food from their farm, and so they fed their livestock and themselves with their farm, completely independent, but didn't really have money per se. So the husband needs a job, right? And so he decides to survey land. Now, surveying was dangerous because what would happen is indentured servants would run from their masters, right, to the new world, or to new land, and they essentially are living on this land kind of not really illegally because it's no one's land yet, but they didn't want to be found because they didn't want to be sent back to their masters. So when these surveyors would come around and survey the land and look around, these squatters or indentured servants would basically, they would try to beat up or kill the surveyors. So the husband quit this job as he realized this was pretty dangerous, and he became a tax collector. Now, this is where, I guess his virtues were his ultimate downfall, as he was too nice, and he essentially wouldn't make people pay, fully if they couldn't, right? Or he would kind of relate to them too much and be like, oh, you don't have to, you can, not pay at all, this, whatever. And the government saw this, and they were looking through their receipts, and they're like, there's, however much missing money. This new tax collector guy, he's got to be stealing it all and pocketing it. That's not okay. So, what do? They throw him in a jail cell. Or, not really, but he's imprisoned. The reason he's not thrown into a jail cell, actually, is because prisons were much different in early America. The thing is, you could still work at your farm during the day, as long as you would stay inside the city limits. So, it was kind of like a really large jail cell just in kind of the entire city, in a way. But that's basically the reason they did this and not just lock them in cells, is because there wasn't enough food for people to just not work. They had to be working. So they essentially lived as citizens during the day, but at night they would have to lock themselves into a cell. But yeah, they still had to work. They could still work in the city, but there is an unfortunate issue with this whole situation, and that's that the husband's farm was outside the city limits. This means he could not work at his farm, could not be producing food, and what does this mean for good old Martha Ballard? Well, this means she's got to do both jobs. She's got to do a man and a woman's job on the farm. Now, this is very, very difficult work, and I'm not going to go too much into details here, but just note a lot of work. And Martha was also a midwife, which means she would help deliver babies, and so she would have to literally canoe over to these women to help them deliver babies. And yeah, these could be long journeys. So here is a quote I have. It says, "In such circumstances, it was comforting to have women with her. They could witness her efforts to ensure safe delivery, and they could assist with the sorrowful task of preparing an infant for burial." And that's by Laurel Ulrich. And essentially what that's saying is just the woman's friends would come over and they would help her out. and if the baby died, they would help them bury it. So that's kind of what that job entailed. There's a lot more about Martha Ballard. That's all I'm going to get into now. Kind of in conclusion, for this whole lives of women, is we have the work they had to do was very, very difficult, but also the community they were in was very like tight-knit and connected. So that's a bit about the lives of women. Now let's get into life at sea. So people were used to sea travel, and a lot of people worked on ships and at the sea, and sea life was cruel. It was also exciting, and sailors made their lives fun. Okay, so first things first, people used to sea, or they were used to sea or traveling by sea. Settlers arrived by boats. You know, they all came to America by boats. They were already kind of familiar with that. And sea was also the sea and the boat travel was also the easiest way to travel at this time. Now, a lot of people worked at the sea. Now, again, this is kind of because they were used to sea travel. It's something they could kind of already do, or at least were somewhat familiar with. Also, it was actually legal to kidnap boys and men to have them work on ships out at sea. So that's real fun, isn't it? And that's kind of what made so many people work at the sea. Some of them by choice, a lot by not free will. So kind of the big point is that sea life was cruel. It was very, very cruel. And this is because the men were kidnapped, they were unhappy, like inherently, right? They could literally be gone for years before they got to return home to see their families. And a lot of them died at sea, because this was also a very, very, very dangerous job. Because these men were unhappy, probably disappointed, angry, whatever, the captains had to be very, very tough and show like no fear, nothing, very tough. Now, that's kind of part of how it was cruel, right? Your captain kind of had to be not necessarily mean, but yeah, pretty much mean. And the food is the next kind of thing, and that's because the food was bad because there was water everywhere, so it could get wet. It's not the biggest deal though, but there were rats as well. It's a bigger deal, and there was no way to store the food, really no good way, so it would rot a lot, and that is not a good thing. So these sailors would not be getting a 5-star meal or anything even close to that. So sailors had to kind of make life fun. They would play cards, tell stories, sing songs. In terms of singing songs, they would sing really repetitive songs when they were doing like a repetitive task. It would make them more efficient. And so that's kind of where that, I think, trope sort of sailors, you know, singing their song, doing their work, all singing in sync, that kind of comes from, was the thing that they did. So life at sea, there was bad food, they would kidnap people, people would die, there was disease. However, it was a very exciting and fun life. I would say never a dull day at sea. Yeah, well, probably there were, but that's outside of the point. Very fun and exciting life in general compared to most people. Now, final kind of point here is life in the Caribbean. So there was war strategy, there was pirates, there was wealth, but there was also a mystery. Very, very cool stuff. So first of all, let's talk about their war strategies. Now, it all kind of began with the Puritans, and they conquered Jamaica because Jamaica really had no defenses. They conquered it, took over. Spain, for whatever reason, just did not want that at all. So they would just continuously keep sending forces into Jamaica to try to take it over. This was very, very costly for the Puritans, and they couldn't really afford, because they had to keep setting, you know, paying for these defense kind of things, you know, paying for their troops, you know, people paying with their lives. Very difficult to continuously keep defending. So they came up with an idea, and it involved pirates. Here we go. Things are about to get interesting. So pirates. Well, the Puritan defense made like a deal with the pirates, and the deal is if the pirates attack the Spanish ships, they basically can only attack exclusively Spanish ships, but they'll get access to Jamaica and kind of can make it like a home for them. At this time, pirates were not illegal, so this wasn't too sketchy of a deal, but yeah, This is kind of where the birth of Port Royal, or at least it's what it's known for, kind of started. And Port Royal is known as was known as the wickedest place on Earth. So that's real fun. Now, with so many pirates coming to Port Royal, the economy did boost there, and this is kind of how it became such, at least the start of how it became such a wicked place. It's because, well, they would rob Spanish ships, and then they would sell them at Port Royal, the pirates would. So the pirates were living life, and that was great and good. It's made very much that kind of typical pirate, dock, all these pirates everywhere, selling, trading, that kind of thing. But yeah, very sketchy business and stuff. So Port Royal, not very family-friendly place. Now, piracy then becomes illegal. So a lot of pirates, they left Port Royal, they kind of, retired from their adventure days, and they, Port Royal shifted into a slave trading hub. So now you can kind of see where that wickedest place on Earth, it just goes from one bad to another. And Port Royal is considered the, modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. So yeah, very bad stuff going on there. Now let's get into kind of the mystery element, or at least it was a mystery at the time. But on June 7th, 1692, at 11:42 a.m., Port Royal sunk into the ocean in a matter of minutes and disappeared from the map. Very, very intense stuff. And at the time, people believed this was God punishing Port Royal for being such an evil place. Now scientists say it was an earthquake, but I mean, there still kind of is, that, you can have the myth or the legend, right? God was punishing Port Royal. So that's very, very interesting. It just completely sunk into the ocean and disappeared, kind of like a pirate Atlantis. So yeah, early American colonies. We talked about the lives of women. They were difficult, but they were also very close communities. We also talked about the lives of sailors. It was both dangerous and fun. And we also talked about the life of pirates and such at the Caribbean. It was full of sin, but it was also full of adventure and profit. So yeah, that's basically everything there is about the early American colonies that I'm going to go over. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So, bye.